Hey, thanks so much for stopping back and checking out part 2 of the Kaleidoscope story. We last left you with a major personnel change when Chris Darrow left the band, and this kicks off the second half of the career of the Kaleidoscope with some great music, so we're going to pick it up right here.
Hello, trouble, welcome home.
So Darrow was replaced by Stuart Brotman on bass, and Brotman is from Philadelphia. And he was a UCLA ethnomusicologist who had played in Can Heat and an early version of the United States of America. So he had some good experience, and he was a little more of a funkier player than Darrow was. And at this point, John Vidican, the drummer, quits the band. And he was replaced by Paul Lagos. Now, there was two guys that were slated for the drummer role here, the drummer position. The other one was Jim Keltner. And they ended up going with Lagos because he was a broader range of rhythms. He could play these polyrhythms really well, and he had played with Little Richard. Now, I had said earlier that bands would always catch the Kaleidoscope when they came into town. And one of the people that really was a big fan was Jimmy Page. Now, Page saw him when he was with the Yardbirds at the Avalon in 1968. Page told the British rock music magazine Zig Zag in 1976 that they are my favorite band of all time, my ideal band, absolutely brilliant. So they were getting some notice from well-known musicians who really appreciated their styling and their musicianship, as well as their songwriting. Here's what Salomon Feldthouse had to say along those lines. We never were a group for screaming teeny boppers, but you bet your sweet ass every damn town we'd play in, all the other professional musicians in town would show up and catch every last set we'd play. The Kaleidoscope played many festivals throughout 1968. The addition of Lagos and Brotman really gave them a more R&B feel when they needed to go there. They were much more rhythmic, and they were able to branch out a little more live. So the focus of their live shows were these more extended jams. They didn't really play any of their commercial stuff live at all, hardly. They also started recording their third album. The third album was they had already played several of these songs with Darrow still in the lineup. And this album is a slight improvement over their second album, and it was the first album to chart. It charted at number 139 on the top 200 in the United States, and it had a couple of great songs. One of the songs that's my favorite song by them is called Lie to Me. This is a great example of all the different instrumentation they used to use, and it's in a rock type of song. And this would have been a perfect single. This was a B-side, but at this point, I guess they were just an album-oriented band and a live band. A couple other notable songs on this album that shows the versatility are The Killing Floor, Banjo, and Cuckoo.
I should have quit you.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles as she flies, and she never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day of July. She just sucks on pretty flowers just to keep her voice so clear. She never hollers cuckoo till the last day of the year. Take it!
Now the third album is called Incredible Kaleidoscope, and on here is probably their best long-form song called 7/8 Suite. This is a band-composed song, and what's interesting is all the instrumentation they incorporate here, and it's an 11-minute song that they play like in 7/8 time. So it's an odd time signature, and it was one of the highlights of their live shows. So as strong as the third album was, this was released in early '69. They continued into the summer playing concerts, and they started recording a fourth album at the end of the year. This is called Bernice. Now, things started to come off the tracks here a little bit as David Lindley fired Stuart Brotman. One of the things that's notable on this fourth album, Bernice, is that they started to get away from some of the Middle Eastern sound that they had made their signature sound on the first three albums. The other thing that they went into a little bit heavier psychedelic stylings here with two songs, notably To Know Is Not To Be and Lulu Arfin Nanny.
Look at heaven through a window, and life is such that you can't touch, no matter what your sorrow.
A couple other notable songs on here are the title track Bernice and Soft and Easy, that was written by Solomon Feldthouse. So who would have thought that Solomon Feldthouse would be such a honey dripper there? They took some very strange missteps on this album. You know, I haven't been showing these album covers. Let me just back up here a little bit. So the first album cover, Side Trips, the psychedelic black and white cover that's really a very sharp looking cover. We have Beacon from Mars. And we have the Incredible Kaleidoscope, which is a gatefold. This came in two different album covers. The reissue had essentially this entire photograph of the band condensed into a single album cover. And the album we're talking about now is Bernice, their last band album. This particular album, this has got Ron Johnson here. He had just joined. He's only on one or two of the songs here. That's the bass player. Very strange songs on here. One of the songs on here that I think is completely out of step with their character is The Chocolate Whale. And that's another Feldthouse song, and it goes like this.
Is you gotta go one way in the chocolate
They have a couple other very odd songs on here called The New Blue Ooze, which is 9 minutes and 42 seconds, and The Ballad of Tommy Udo. So they were really getting far afield from what their real sound had been. And when they were touring on this album, they had good players, but the players weren't really gelling. And shortly after, David Lindley fired Solomon Feldthouse. Now at this point, Lindley had kind of become the de facto leader of the band, and he was the guy in charge. It no longer was a democratic situation, and that was an issue because Chester Krill, he had ideas. He was an original member. So once Feldthouse was fired from the band just kind of fell apart. They lost their soul. They lost that gravelly voice, that sound, and things really started to come apart quickly then. Before Feldthouse had left, they had recorded some tracks for this soundtrack, Zappersky Points, which was a Michelangelo Antonioni film. And other bands on this record or on the soundtrack were Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, and the Youngbloods. They recorded two songs on here. One is called Brother Mary, and the other one's called Mickey's Tune.
Brother Mary, dressed in Harry, he don't care what the people say.
So Chester Krill told of the story where when this movie came out, this was a total bomb. In fact, the box office, it cost $7 million to make. It only made $1 million back. And a lot of the different bands went to see this movie all together, and most of them just walked out before the movie was even over. It was that bad. I've not seen it yet, but the soundtrack is actually quite good. So not long after the Zappersky Points soundtrack, David Lindley fired Chester Krill. Now, Krill, one thing I didn't mention, Krill was a unique guy. He had a pseudonym, different pseudonym for every album. So on the first album, his pseudonym was Fenris Epp. Second album was Max Buddha. Third album, Templeton Parsley. And on Bernice, it was Connie Krill. So that was as close to his actual name that he came. And the story goes that he didn't want his parents to know that he was playing the devil's music, so he was using these pseudonyms. And once he was fired, David Lindley legally secured the ownership of the name Kaleidoscope. So he was really wanting to be in charge and had visions for the band. But strangely enough, he quit the band a few months later and just said, screw it. So they weren't going anywhere, and it was all fizzling out anyway. So unfortunately, that is the petered out ending of the Kaleidoscope. They, like most other 60s bands, by 1970, they were pretty much done. And David Lindley and Chris Darrow went on to play with people like Jackson Browne and Linda Ronstadt. And so they did a lot of session work in later years, in the 70s especially. If you are looking to get any of their music, this is the first album I bought by them. This was on a budget label called Backtrack. I bought this in about 1986 or 87. And back in those days, you had, the record stores had like an oldie section with just 60s music. So this is the time period 60s music was coming back. And this little collection of songs here, only 8 tracks, is a great introductory point if you're looking for some vinyl to get yourself started on the Kaleidoscope. It's got a couple great songs on it. It's got Keep Your Mind Open, Elevator Man, Lulu Orphan Nanny, Lie to Me, Egyptian Gardens, Killing Floor, and it gives a little bit of a bio on the back as well. So that's one to look for. On CD, there's a couple compilations. This first one came out in 1991. It's called Egyptian Candy. This is an 18-song compilation and very, very well put together and has liner notes in it as well. This compilation, called Pulsating Dream, is their entire epic catalog on 3 CDs. And this came out in about 2001, I believe. It's still available, but with a different cover. So this is, if you're looking to be a completist, this might be a way to start. The albums aren't that hard to find. The first couple are getting a little pricier, but you can get all of them are reissued, I believe. Not too hard to get. Though the Kaleidoscope petered out completely by 1970, they still had their fans, one of them being Jimmy Page. So when Led Zeppelin formed Swan Song Records in 1973, they contacted the Kaleidoscope to see if they had any old recordings they could put on that label. So they were very well revered amongst certain circles of musicians. And they ended up not going on to Swan Song. They actually recorded their own reunion album called When Scopes Collide, and that wound up on Mike Nesmith's Pacific Arts label. You'd be hard-pressed to find another band anything like the Kaleidoscope. They're one of my all-time favorite bands, partly because of their great fusion of all these different musical styles and their fine playing. I really have a lot of respect for them. So this is the perfect kind of band I like to showcase here on this channel, and there's many more to come here on Pop Goes the 60s.